The Forbidden City, or in Chinese Zhijiancheng, is the Imperial Palace complex located right in the center of the Imperial City in Beijing, China.
It was the residence of 24 Ming and Qing dynasty emperors, and the center of political power in China for over 500 years from 1420 to 1924. The palace is now administered by the Palace Museum.
As a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world. The Forbidden City is arguably the most famous palace in all of Chinese history, and is the largest preserved royal palace complex still standing in the world.
Since 1925, the Forbidden City has been under the charge of the Palace Museum, whose extensive collection of artwork and artifacts was built upon the imperial collections of the Ming and Qing dynasties. The Forbidden City was declared a World Heritage Site in 1987. The complex claims to consist of 9,999 rooms in total, although experts have shown in recent years that the number only amounts to 8,886, covering 72 hectares or 178 acres. The palace exemplifies the opulence of the residences of the Chinese emperor and the traditional Chinese palatial architecture, and has influenced cultural and architectural developments in East Asia and elsewhere. It is listed by UNESCO as the largest collection of preserved ancient wooden structures in the world. Since 2012, the Forbidden City has seen an average of 14 million visitors annually and received more than 19 million visitors in 2019. In 2018, the Forbidden City's market value was estimated at $70 billion, making it both the world's most valuable palace and the most valuable piece of real estate anywhere in the world. It was listed as the first batch of national key cultural relics in 1961. The palace is extremely important to the Chinese public and nation, who often view it as a cultural and heavenly link to their ancestors.
The palace gained its name from its enormous scale and severely restricted access to all but the emperor, the imperial family, and eunuchs. Hence, the Chinese term Forbidden City emerged. The punishment for unauthorized entry to the palace was immediate execution. The common English name Forbidden City is a translation of the Chinese name Zhijiancheng, which first formally appeared in 1576. Another English name of similar origin is Forbidden Palace, though city is much closer to the original Chinese meaning. The name Zhijiancheng has significance on many levels. Z, or purple, refers to the North Star, which in ancient China was called the Ziwei Star, and in traditional Chinese astrology was the heavenly abode of the Jade Emperor. The surrounding celestial region, the Ziwei enclosure, was the realm of the Jade Emperor and his family. The Forbidden City, as the residence of the terrestrial emperor, was its earthly counterpart. Jin refers to a prohibition or taboo. Cheng originally meant a castle, fortress, or fortification, but in modern Chinese, the character means city.
Today, the site is most commonly known in Chinese as Gugong, which means the former palace. The museum, which is based in these buildings, is known as the Palace Museum. In the Ming and Qing dynasties, the Forbidden City was also known as Dan'e, or Palace City. When the Hongwu Emperor's son Zhu Di became the Yongle Emperor, he moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing, and construction began in 1406 on what would become the Forbidden City. Construction lasted 14 years and required more than 1 million workers. Materials used include whole logs of precious Phoebe Zhenin wood found in the jungles of southwestern China, and large blocks of marble from quarries near Beijing. The floors of major halls were paved with golden bricks, specially baked paving bricks from Suzhou. From 1420 to 1644, the Forbidden City was the seat of the Ming dynasty. In April 1644, it was captured by rebel forces led by Li Zicheng, who proclaimed himself emperor of the Shun dynasty. He soon fled Beijing before the combined armies of former Ming general Wu Sengui and Manchu forces, setting fire to parts of the Forbidden City in the process. By October, the Manchus had achieved supremacy in northern China, and a ceremony was held at the Forbidden City to proclaim the young Shunji emperor as ruler of all China under the Qing dynasty. The Qing rulers changed the names on some of the principal buildings to emphasize harmony rather than supremacy, made the nameplates bilingual in Chinese and Manchu, and introduced shamanist elements to the palace. In 1860, during the Second Opium War, Anglo-French forces took control of the Forbidden City and occupied it until the end of the war. In 1900, Empress Dowager Xiaodi fled from the Forbidden City during the Boxer Rebellion, leaving it to be occupied by forces of the Treaty Powers until the following year. After being the home of 24 emperors, 14 of the Ming dynasty and 10 of the Qing dynasty, the Forbidden City ceased being the political center of China in 1912 with the abdication of Puyi, the last emperor of China. Under an agreement with the new Republic of China government, Puyi remained in the inner court, while the outer court was given over to public use until he was evicted after a coup in 1924. The Palace Museum was then established in the Forbidden City in 1925. In 1933, the Japanese invasion of China forced the evacuation of the national treasures in the Forbidden City. Part of the collection returned at the end of World War II, but the other part was evacuated to Taiwan in 1948 under orders of Chiang Kai-shek, whose Kuomintang was losing the Chinese Civil War. This relatively small but high-quality collection was kept in storage until 1965, when it again became public as the core of the National Palace Museum in Taipei. After the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949, some damage was done to the Forbidden City as the country was swept up in revolutionary zeal. During the Cultural Revolution, however, further destruction was prevented when Premier Zhou Enlai sent an army battalion to guard the city. The Forbidden City was declared a World Heritage Site in 1987 by UNESCO as the Imperial Palace of the Ming and Qing dynasties due to its significant place in the development of Chinese architecture and culture. In the early 21st century, the Palace Museum carried out a 16-year restoration project to repair and restore all buildings in the Forbidden City to their pre-1911 state, with the goal that 76% of the palace would be open to the public by 2020. As a result of that project, the Shukang Palace was officially opened to the public in 2013, after initially being displayed in its original state. A sculpture museum was opened in the Sinning Palace in 2015. Also opened in 2015 were the precincts around Sinning Palace, the Yanyin Building, and the Donghua Gate. On the 5th of November 2024, 100 years was marked since the expulsion of the last emperor of China, Puyi, from the palace by Republican forces, led by Feng Yuxiang.
The Forbidden City is a rectangle, measuring 961 meters from north to south and 753 meters from east to west. It consists of 980 surviving buildings with 8,886 bays of rooms. A common myth states that there are 9,999 rooms, including antechambers, based on oral tradition, but it is not supported by survey evidence. The layout of the Forbidden City protected the Imperial Code of Ethics as a physical installation. The courtyard was built on a massive, luxurious scale, but it has the appearance of an ordinary quadrangle courtyard. The Forbidden City was designed to be the center of the ancient walled city of Beijing. It is enclosed in a larger walled area called the Imperial City. The Imperial City is in turn enclosed by the inner city. To its south lies the outer city. The Forbidden City remains important in the civic scheme of Beijing. The central north-south axis remains the central axis of Beijing. This axis extends to the south through Tiananmen Gate to Tiananmen Square, the ceremonial center of the People's Republic of China, and on to Yongdingmen Gate. To the north, it extends through Jingshan Park to the Drum Tower and Bell Tower. This axis is not exactly aligned north-south, but is tilted by slightly more than 2 degrees. Researchers now believe that the axis was designed during the Yuan dynasty to be aligned with Chengdu, the other capital of their empire. The Forbidden City is surrounded by a 7.9-meter high city wall and a 6-meter deep by 52-meter wide moat. The walls are 8.62 meters wide at the base, tapering to 6.66 meters at the top. These walls served as both defensive walls and retaining walls for the palace. They were constructed with a rammed earth core and surfaced with 3 layers of specially baked bricks on both sides, with the interstices filled with mortar. At the 4 corners of the wall sit corner towers, with intricate roofs boasting 72 ridges, reproducing the pavilion of Prince Teng and the Yellow Crane Pavilion, as they appeared in Song Dynasty paintings. These towers are the most visible parts of the palace to people outside the walls, and much folklore is attached to them. According to one legend, artisans could not put a corner tower back together after it was dismantled for renovations in the early Qing dynasty, and it was only rebuilt after the intervention of carpenter immortal Lu Ban. The wall is pierced by a gate on each side. At the southern end is the main Meridian Gate. To the north is the Gate of Divine Prowess, which faces Jingshan Park. The east and west gates are the East Glorious Gate and the West Glorious Gate. All gates in the Forbidden City are decorated with 9x9 arrays of golden doornails, except for the East Glorious Gate, which has only 8. The Meridian Gate has 2 protruding wings, which form 3 sides of a square before it, and 5 gateways. The central gateway is part of the Imperial Way, a stone-flagged path that forms the central axis of the Forbidden City and the ancient city of Beijing itself, leading all the way from the Gate of China in the south to Jingshan Park in the north. Except for the Empress on the occasion of her wedding and successful students after the Imperial examination, only the Emperor could walk or ride on the Imperial Way.
Traditionally, the Forbidden City is divided into two parts: the outer court or front court to the south, which was used for ceremonial purposes, and the inner court or back palace to the north, which was the residence of the emperor and his family, and was used for day-to-day affairs of state. Generally, the Forbidden City has three vertical axes. The most important buildings are situated on the central north-south axis. Entering from the Meridian Gate, one encounters a large square, pierced by the meandering inner Golden Water River, which is crossed by 5 bridges. Beyond the square stands the Gate of Supreme Harmony. Behind that is a square from which a 3-tiered white marble terrace rises, and 3 halls stand on top of this terrace, the focus of the palace complex. From the south, these are the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Central Harmony, and the Hall of Preserving Harmony. The Hall of Supreme Harmony is the largest and rises some 30 meters above the level of the surrounding square. It is the ceremonial center of imperial power and the largest surviving wooden structure in China. It is 9 bays wide and 5 bays deep, the numbers 9 and 5 being symbolically connected to the majesty of the emperor. Set into the ceiling at the center of the hall is an intricate caisson decorated with a coiled dragon, from the mouth of which issues a chandelier-like set of metal balls, called the Xuanyuan mirror. In the Ming dynasty, the emperor held court here to discuss affairs of state. During the Qing dynasty, as emperors held court far more frequently, a less ceremonious location was used instead, and the Hall of Supreme Harmony was only used for ceremonial purposes, such as enthronements, investitures, and imperial weddings. The Hall of Central Harmony is a smaller, square hall used by the emperor to prepare and rest before and during ceremonies. Behind it, the Hall of Preserving Harmony was used for rehearsing ceremonies and was also the site of the final stage of the imperial examination. All 3 halls feature imperial thrones, the largest and most elaborate one being that in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. At the center of the stairs leading up to the terraces from the northern and southern sides are ceremonial ramps, part of the Imperial Way, featuring elaborate and symbolic bas-relief carvings. The northern ramp, behind the Hall of Preserving Harmony, is carved from a single piece of stone 16.57 meters long, 3.07 meters wide, and 1.7 meters thick. It weighs some 200 tons and is the largest such carving in China. The southern ramp in front of the Hall of Supreme Harmony is even longer, but is made from 2 stone slabs joined. The joint was ingeniously hidden using overlapping bas-relief carvings and was only discovered when weathering widened the gap in the 20th century. The stone slabs were likely transported from a quarry via ice sledge along an ice path lubricated by well water en route. In the southwest and southeast of the outer court are the halls of military eminence and literary glory. The former was used at various times for the emperor to receive ministers and hold court, and later housed the palace's own printing house. The latter was used for ceremonial lectures by highly regarded Confucian scholars, and later became the office of the Grand Secretariat. A copy of the complete library of the 4 treasuries was stored there. To the northeast are the southern 3 places, which was the residence of the crown prince. The inner court is separated from the outer court by an oblong courtyard lying orthogonal to the city's main axis. It was the home of the emperor and his family. In the Qing dynasty, the emperor lived and worked almost exclusively in the inner court, with the outer court used only for ceremonial purposes. At the center of the inner court is another set of 3 halls. From the south, these are Palace of Heavenly Purity, Hall of Union, and Palace of Earthly Tranquility. Smaller than the outer court halls, the 3 halls of the inner court were the official residences of the emperor and the empress. The emperor, representing Yang and the heavens, would occupy the Palace of Heavenly Purity. The empress, representing Yin and the earth, would occupy the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. In between them was the Hall of Union, where the Yin and Yang mixed to produce harmony. The Palace of Heavenly Purity is a double-eaved building and set on a single-level white marble platform. It is connected to the Gate of Heavenly Purity to its south by a raised walkway. In the Ming dynasty, it was the residence of the emperor. However, beginning from the Yongzheng emperor of the Qing dynasty, the emperor lived instead at the smaller Hall of Mental Cultivation to the west, out of respect to the memory of the Kangxi emperor. The Palace of Heavenly Purity then became the emperor's audience hall. A caisson is set into the roof, featuring a coiled dragon. Above the throne hangs a tablet reading Justice and Honor. The Palace of Earthly Tranquility is a double-eaved building, 9 bays wide and 3 bays deep. In the Ming dynasty, it was the residence of the empress. In the Qing dynasty, large portions of the palace were converted for shamanist worship by the new Manchu rulers. From the reign of the Yongzheng emperor, the empress moved out of the palace, However, 2 rooms in the Palace of Earthly Harmony were retained for use on the emperor's wedding night. Between these 2 palaces is the Hall of Union, which is square in shape with a pyramidal roof. Stored here are the 25 imperial seals of the Qing dynasty, as well as other ceremonial items. Behind these 3 halls lies the Imperial Garden. Relatively small and compact in design, the garden nevertheless contains several elaborate landscaping features. To the north of the garden is the Gate of Divine Might. Directly to the west is the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Originally a minor palace, this became the de facto residence and office of the emperor starting from Yongjung. In the last decades of the Qing dynasty, empresses dowager, including Civic, held court from the eastern partition of the hall. Located around the Hall of Mental Cultivation are the offices of the Grand Council and other key government bodies. The northeastern section of the inner court is taken up by the Palace of Tranquil Longevity, a complex built by the Qianlong Emperor in anticipation of his retirement. It mirrors the setup of the Forbidden City proper and features an outer court, an inner court, and gardens and temples. The entrance to the Palace of Tranquil Longevity is marked by a glazed tile 9-dragon screen. 6 western and 6 eastern palaces. To the west and to the east of the 3 main halls of the inner court are the 6 western palaces, Liugong, Silugong, and the 6 eastern palaces, Dongliugong, Dongliugong. These palaces were the residences of the imperial consorts. 6 palaces lay to the west and 6 to the east of the 3 main halls, hence the name. The architecture of the 12 palaces connected by passageways is more or less the same. The western and eastern palaces each have a layout of 3 palaces on either side of an alley that runs from north to south. Every palace has its own courtyards, main halls, and side halls. The main halls stand in the middle and the side halls are in the east and west. The front courtyard and its main hall was used for receptions, while the back courtyard and its main hall served as living quarters. An imperial consort with the rank of concubine and above was given a residence in the main section of a palace, and was the manager of that palace, an honor in itself. Lower-ranking imperial consorts, noble ladies and below, lived in the side halls of the palaces and were supervised by the higher-ranking imperial consort. The 12 palaces were the place where many of the Qing emperors were born and grew up, and they formed the daily life of the imperial family. During the late Qing era, Empress Dowager Ciacti resided in one of the western palaces and became known as the Western Empress, while her co-regent Empress Dowager Qian lived in one of the eastern palaces and was thus known as the Eastern Empress, Sining Palace and Shukang Palace. To the west of the Hall of Mental Cultivation in the western area of the inner court is Sining Palace, Palace of Compassion and Tranquility, and Shukang Palace, Palace of Longevity and Good Health. The palaces were the residences of widowed consorts of previous emperors. In accordance with feudal manners, emperors should not live with the wives of late emperors, so they lived in this separate area of the inner court. The Sining Palace is bigger and older than Shukang Palace, which is located to the west of Sining Palace. To the south of Sining Palace is Sining Garden.
Religion. Religion was an important part of life for the imperial court. In the Qing dynasty, the Palace of Earthly Harmony became a place of Manchu shamanist ceremony. At the same time, the native Chinese Taoist religion continued to have an important role throughout the Ming and Qing dynasties. There were 2 Taoist shrines, one in the Imperial Garden and another in the central area of the inner court. Another prevalent form of religion in the Qing dynasty palace was Buddhism. A number of temples and shrines were scattered throughout the inner court, including that of Tibetan Buddhism or Lamaism. Buddhist iconography also proliferated in the interior decorations of many buildings. Of these, the Pavilion of the Rain of Flowers is one of the most important. It housed a large number of Buddhist statues, icons, and mandalas placed in ritualistic arrangements.
The palace complex is surrounded by numerous opulent imperial gardens and temples, including the 22-hectare or 54-acre Zhongshan Park, the sacrificial imperial ancestral temple, the 69-hectare or 171-acre Beihai Park, and the 23-hectare or 57-acre Jingshan Park. The Forbidden City is surrounded on 3 sides by imperial gardens. To the north is Jingshan Park, also known as Prospect Hill, an artificial hill created from the soil excavated to build the moat and from nearby lakes. To the west lies Zhongnanhai, a former royal garden centered on 2 connected lakes, which now serves as the central headquarters for the Chinese Communist Party and the State Council of the People's Republic of China. To the northwest lies Beihai Park, also centered on a lake connected to the southern 2, and a popular royal park. To the south of the Forbidden City were 2 important shrines, the Imperial Shrine of Family or the Imperial Ancestral Temple, Chinese Pinyin Taimiao, and the Imperial Shrine of State or Beijing Shejitan, Chinese Pinyin Shejitan, where the emperor would venerate the spirits of his ancestors and the spirit of the nation, respectively. Today, these are the Beijing Laboring People's Cultural Hall and Zhongshan Park, commemorating Sun Yat-sen, respectively. To the south, two nearly identical gatehouses stand along the main axis. They are the Upright Gate, Chinese, Pinyin Duanmen, and the more famous Tiananmen Gate, which is decorated with a portrait of Mao Zedong in the center and two placards to the left and right. Long live the People's Republic of China, Chinese Zhonghua Gong Higuo Mo Sui, Pinyin Zhonghua Renmin Gong Heguo Wan Sui, and long live the great unity of the world's peoples, Chinese Jie Tuan Jie Mo Sui, Pinyin Shi Jie Renmin Datuanji Wan Sui. The Tiananmen Gate connects the Forbidden City precinct with the modern symbolic center of the Chinese state, Tiananmen Square.
While development is now tightly controlled in the vicinity of the Forbidden City, throughout the past century, uncontrolled and sometimes politically motivated demolition and reconstruction has changed the character of the areas surrounding the Forbidden City. Since 2000, the Beijing municipal government has worked to evict governmental and military institutions occupying some historical buildings, and has established a park around the remaining parts of the Imperial City Wall. In 2004, an ordinance relating to building height and planning restriction was renewed to establish the Imperial City area and the Northern City area as a buffer zone for the Forbidden City. In 2005, the Imperial City and Beihai, as an extension item to the Summer Palace, were included in the shortlist for the next World Heritage Site in Beijing.
Don't forget to subscribe to World Wonders Unveiled and turn on notifications.